All right, it's loading. It'll be just 1 second. Okay, we're good to go.
Thank you, Steve. I'll go ahead and call the meeting to order. Madam Clerk, roll call.
Before we begin roll call, the city attorney would like to make an announcement to the council regarding the teleconferencing of this meeting.
Good afternoon, Mayor and Council. Prior to roll call, I just want to make clear for the record, and it should be reflected in the minutes, that the governor has issued executive orders relaxing the requirements pertaining to remote meetings under the Brown Act. I won't go into the specific details this time. You've heard those 2 weeks ago. But the idea is to facilitate social distancing and slow the spread of the coronavirus pandemic. And these executive orders have authorized this council to hold public meetings via teleconference. So under the executive orders, we are now doing this via this particular Zoom meeting. I will now turn this back over to the city clerk to do a roll call, and then I would ask to be recognized once more to go over the remote meeting protocols. Thank you.
Roll call, Councilmember Hudson,
Yes, I'm here.
Councilmember Alone,
Here.
Councilmember Perkins,
Here.
Vice Mayor Safar,
Here.
and Mayor Clarkson.
Here. Mark, we recognize you again.
Thank you. I would like to ask the mayor, vice mayor, and council to respond to this particular question by raising your hand in the affirmative. If you can hear me well, please indicate by raising your hand. Thank you. Seeing all five, I would like to ask now if any member of the city council has not been able to hear any of the proceedings thus far. And seeing no one raise their hand, the record should reflect that all council members present have indicated that they were able to hear each other clearly. I would next request that any council member speak up at this time if you have a reason to believe, based on voice recognition or picture, that the person representing themselves to be any of you of the council members is not truly that person. Seeing no one affirm, I would say that
There's a joke in there somewhere. Come on.
All right.
We need to work harder at this. City manager does not have wings on his head. I would like to point out that for the record. Just
I saw
Just
Rudy
one.
last night.
And then finally, I would like to advise the mayor and council and the city clerk that any votes taken during this teleconference meeting must be taken by roll call. Thank you.
Thank you, Martin. Madam Clerk,
Item 2, public comment.
is there anybody who has indicated would like to make a public comment?
We have no requests to speak. Item 3, workshop 3.1, fiscal year 2020-2021 budget workshop.
Okay, thank you, Mr. Mayor and Council. This is our first budget workshop that we are having this year. And as you know, it's been quite a course to get where we are. I'd first like to acknowledge Eva Phelps and her entire team and all the staff that have worked on this budget. It's been pretty harrowing, I might say. As you know, that we've been hit with the COVID-19. We've had significant economic impacts, not only this year, and we anticipate significant economic impacts next year. Our team had a budget prepared to present to this council. We had to basically go back and scrap our original budget and start from beginning. We had to go back to our mid-year and readjust our analysis of revenues based on the impacts that we know have occurred. And so as we go through this budget presentation today, what you're seeing today is the result of a lot of hard work and long hours of this budget team to once again come back to the table with a budget for you to take a look at, consider at what level you want to maintain the budget, or if further action needs to be taken on it. So with that, I'll turn it over to Eva.
Good afternoon, everyone. I want to go ahead and put the presentation up that we're going to work with. Okay. Okay. Can you all see the presentation?
Yes.
Yes.
Okay. Okay. So I want to first get started going over the presentation outline. Today we're going just an introduction of where we are, budget development. I'll go over the outline, the process that we went through, the 1920 revisions that we kind of had to rework, some information on our sales tax through our HDL consultant. And we'll go into the status of the 2021 budget development. We have some options for the council to consider, and then our next steps from here. So this presentation is intended to provide the City Council with an update of the status of the 2021 budget. We're hoping to bring this budget back to you, a full budget in June for council adoption. So we started the budget process off back in January. And then the council had their goal setting retreat back in February. And we will be coming back at another council workshop for the departments to go over their major action plan items that tie into the council goals. And then in March, we were kind of formalizing our department requests. COVID-19 hit. We had to do some revisions to the 1920 mid-year projections that we prepared and presented to the City Council back in early March. And then we also had to make some revisions to our 2021 preliminary requests, and then meeting with the city manager to go over all of those back in March. So today we're here to, this is our first budget study session. We may need more if necessary. We're planning to bring the full budget and the CIP, 5-year CIP to council sometime. We have a date, May 12th. That's not locked in, but we just wanted to put that on the calendar and see if that works for the full council. And then formal adoption of the budget on June 9th. Okay, so here is kind of a summary and I'm going to be looking off to the side because the faces are showing up on some of this charts, so I'll have to look at my paper chart. So due to the effects of COVID-19 and currently and before we could move forward, we needed to go back and look at the 1920 revision. So this chart is showing you revenue. And I just put on here what our actuals were for 18-19, just so you can kind of get a feel for our revenue. 54.3. We had our budget, adopted budget with some adjustments of 52.74. At mid-year, we came to you and said our revenue was going to be about 53.6 million. After doing revisions, they're going to be closer to like 50 million. And at mid-year, we were expecting about 800,000 more than budget. So we thought we were going to see a little surplus, but after revising the numbers, we're seeing a $3.9 million shift in the mid-year projections and a 4.6 million below the 18-19 actuals. What we're seeing the drops is in sales tax, TOT, franchise fees, charges for services. That's pretty much the recreational programs, and also miscellaneous revenues, the recreational facility rentals that we had to close things down. So that's pretty much how we stand on revenue. And then I'll just move on to show you some charts that I got from HDL, just kind of letting you see kind of what's happening with our sales tax. So this chart is just showing you the sales tax trend and forecast.
Excuse me, Eva, could I ask a question?
Sure.
If you, this is a good place, is that you can leave the slide where you,
Okay.
your assumptions here, I'm just curious, do you, and when are you anticipating some semblance of any sort of prior to March revenue?
Well, we're actually kind of showing the slow growth coming back in July and August, and then everything
Okay.
pretty much normal later in the year. But for now, we're showing just a slow tick up through the summer and then ranking that back up.
Okay, thank you.
Wait a minute. Can I stay with that a minute? Because I think
Sure.
the question that Member Alone's asking us, what I'm looking at is, I have a hard time answering too. You talked about it coming back in June and July, but the question is, where is it in March? In other words, from January, February, March, were we just in a constant?
We did very well.
That's what I thought.
In the
Yeah.
fourth quarter. The first quarter of this year, we won't have those numbers for sales tax
Okay.
until June. So as you see on the chart, those are kind of estimates. We did really well up until March.
Okay.
In March, we kind of took a dive. So we're showing that in the second quarter, we'll see another big hit, and then it starts ticking back up in the third and fourth quarters of this year.
Okay. And is that first quarter get the Christmas sales or?
No, we've received all of that. Just
Okay.
recently we got the report, so we did very well. And I think if you look at the chart, fourth quarter was that big spike of 3.2.
Yeah.
I wonder,
Yeah.
can you see my cursor?
I think that was my purchasing. Thank you.
Yeah, so we saw, and that's the thing, we did really well. And then even prior to that, when you see the changes in here going up, that's because City Center came. And then when we're making this dive is that City Center, we're losing all of that, plus everything else that we had accumulated in the past year.
So
Okay.
Q1, we're 2.2, yeah?
Say
Is
that
that
again.
the estimate?
What did you say?
I said Q1, we're 2.2 estimated.
Quarter 2.2, yes.
Yeah.
And then, yeah, for that's 2.2, and then second quarter is 1.9. And these are just quarterly numbers. Go back.
So to the extent, so you're envisioning sort of Q2 is
Worse than first.
right, and so is your ramp in July actually, Eva, or is it in June?
The ramp up would be in the starting in July, between July and
Okay.
September. That would be the third
All
quarter.
right.
And
If I
then-
could suggest a process as far as how I'm thinking about this, and I agree with what you're saying. I think what we should look towards is having sort of a couple of sessions here while we absorb all this. And then as we get closer to that June adoption, or late, we may have a clearer picture at that point, so that we have kind of a, oh, what if it actually extends into the summer, some rough things like this that you think about.
Right.
Because our normal process would have been, hey, boom, middle of May, it's more or less locked in, right? And with some tweaks. And then, so we don't have that much visibility at this point to what we really need to make decisions about. I think this is a good approach. So I'll leave it at that. But I really think that's how we kind of have to approach this. It's like, yes, but kind of a thing.
Correct. And we're still looking. So by the time we have another workshop, we would have looked at revenues again.
Right.
Yeah.
Cool. Okay. Thank you.
And actually, this chart is by the major industries. And I just wanted to kind of show you this one. So if you look at the pink, which is our business in industry, our business to business, it's always volatile, all over, up and down. But you see that it takes the biggest dive down for this quarter. And also, if you look at fuel and service stations, you know, gas prices are down, people are staying at home, so that kind of took a hit. But the two other ones that kind of city center surrounds is the general consumer good, which is the light blue, and the restaurants and hotels, which is the dark blue. The hotels are kind of included in that, and it kind of dived, it took a downward spike, and then we show it's still gradually going back up. But this was a good visual for how the industries are looking.
So food and drug is grocery stores and drugstores?
Mm-hmm. Correct.
But we don't get anything for the food, do we?
We don't get anything for the food, only anything taxable.
Yeah, so anything taxable that goes through Safeway's cash register,
Right.
like their deli.
Right. And so
Okay.
I can also mention in the green is the state and county pools. We're seeing a big uptick in that because of the Wayfair decision that was it's been fully implemented. So now we're getting more of the online sales, but they still go into the county pool, but we get a bigger proportion of that, the cities do. This chart was just, this is their estimate of how we're looking. So as you can see, we ended the year at 10.9 for last year. Our projections is 10.2. However, I mentioned to you at the mid-year, I believe, that the state gave us almost $200,000, about $196,000 that should have been directly going to the county. So we had to take that was from last year. So they're just telling us that, and they wouldn't make the correction. So we had to give the county that money. And we always have HDL, their share when they find misallocated money. And we get that money, part of their contract, they get a percentage of that, whatever they're fined. So that's about 20,000 shaved off of our revenue. So the real projection for 1920 for now is about 9,973,000. And then this is their projection going into 2021. And we'll go over that more when I get to the 2021 numbers. Okay, so this is the expenditures. At mid-year, we were 700,000 under budget, 700,000. And then after we revised the budget, we're about 900,000 under budget. So we were able to reduce some of our expenditures even more so. However, we're still about 500,000 above the fiscal year 18-19 actuals. This is just summarizing the transfers in and transfers out and what the net or increase or decrease to the fund balance. So right here under others, when you compare the 19-20 revisions to the mid-year, we were coming in a little bit less. We were able to reduce some of the transfers in obligations because once we did some cuts on the Doherty Valley side, there was less that the general fund had to transfer to make it whole. So as you can see, we were coming in at mid-year after, and these include the adjustments. We had about about $3.3 million worth of adjustments that the council approved at mid-year. So this was where we said we would land at 22.3 million in reserves. That's 48% of the policy reserve. Now that we made the adjustments, we're going to be down to 20.4 million and 43.8% of reserves. So that was another 1.9 million in reserves that to make the 1920 whole.
That's still pretty good news,
Yeah, it's
considering.
not bad, but we just wanted to bring it to your attention.
Thank you.
So now moving on, since we were able now to know where we're going to end, so we know where we go from here, some key developments for the 2020 assumptions where we're still seeing, we're projecting slow and declining revenue growth at the very beginning and then ramping up. And then the expenditure reductions we had due to COVID-19, that we did an exercise of making sure we're reducing so that we can make sure that our expenditures are down to offset some of the reductions in revenue. However, we still have our inflationary increases, which are, utility costs, salary and benefits, and maintenance contracts. This is the third year, so the employees will now be paying 3%, the full 3% of their the employee portion of the pension. So that's still good that we have that in place. We do want to talk about some new position requests that's included in this presentation, and we do still have funding in for the infrastructure maintenance fund. So key developments in the budget, where it's a lot of uncertainties. These are the issues that we're having uncertainties due to COVID-19. Our OPEB trust. We spoke to this SERP that has that manages our trust, and we have already lost like $3.8 million. We did see on the 7th and 8th that there was about almost a $200 increase. So that's the net of those two. So we're about 3.8 million. On the pension trust, I'm meeting with PARS on Thursday to go over what's going on with that balance. And also on the OPEB trust, we have actuaries working on the actuary for this year, because we do that every other year. And this is the year that has to be completed. So we'll be coming back to the full council to give you an update on the OPEB actuary, probably in late May or early June. And CalPERS is just an unknown. There's a lot of talk about CalPERS, but I don't have enough information to give you on CalPERS. But just based on what the economy has taken a dive, I'm pretty sure CalPERS is going to have to make some adjustments, and hopefully our unfunded pension liability is not going to go up, but I'm pretty sure it will. Other uncertainties, issues that we're looking at is just the long-term financial stability and impacts of future staffing and having to use some of the reserves. Our estimated general fund, we're estimating to be 52.6 million. That's still 2.9 million or 6% above the 1920 revisions. So that's still good that we're still higher. However, we're 1.7 million below the 18-19 actuals, and we're just seeing revenue loss, and we'll just keep monitoring that as we go along. Expenditures, we're estimating 51 million in expenditures. That's 4 million or 9% above the 1920 revised projections. However, remember the revised projections we put in shows a lot of savings from vacancies. So if you compare it to the adopted budget, we're 2.5 million or 5% above, and 4.6 million above 18-19 actuals. And budget covers all the salary and benefit increases and employee contributions and different contracts and water and energy costs. And like I mentioned before, the expenditure reductions due to COVID, we've incorporated that too. On our transfers, we have 1.2 million of transfers in, which is overhead from other departments that comes to the general fund. And then the transfers out is 4.8 million, which there's a transfer of 1.8 to the Doherty Valley Fund, 1.5 to fund the infrastructure maintenance fund, and 1 million for the 2019 COP. We now, I'm going to be calling it COP 13 because we usually do it in the order of what's the next, this is our 13th COP that the city have ever done, but just so you'll know which one I'm talking about. And then $500,000 for like DERFA and Street Smarts, the different programs we have. So the net difference of those is 3.6 million in transfers. So we have requesting 2 new police officers for new staffing for this coming year. The total for those 2 positions about almost 400,000. So that's incorporated in the budget numbers. This graph just kind of shows you the revenue, comparing it to last year, the actuals for 18-19 versus the revisions for 19-20 and then 20-21. And the same with expenditures and net transfers. And that net transfers, even though it shows on this chart, revenue is pacing better than expenditures. But if you incorporate the net transfers out into the expenditures, then that's when you'll see that our expenditures are actually more than our revenue. I would have stacked these, but I was having difficulty with trying to put that on there. So hopefully the next time we'll rearrange it so that you can see it a little bit better, but I wanted to bring it to your attention. Okay, so now revenue for 2021. As you can see, we're like property tax, we're still showing increases in property tax. Sales tax, we're showing that, just when we compare what 2021 to the 19-20 revision is about 400,000 deficit. And then, and we're losing about 1.4 million just when you compare it to 18-19 actuals. Some other items of revenue like the TOT we're still slightly up because we reduced it, but we're slightly up, but still lower than what the 18-19s are, actuals are. Franchise fees, we are showing a slight increase. We had a bigger increase, but there's some, I guess, some problems with the commercial recycling and franchise on that piece. So that caused it to go down. So hopefully that will tick back up. But we're still above 18-19 levels, and that's because we had that increase, I think, at January. Charges for services, that one kind of goes up and down, but we're showing us we're still slightly above this year, but we're lower than last year. Our investment income, we're just showing it flat. We had a very good year, but that was like an accounting entry because of all the gains we had on our investments. In 18-19, we're usually seeing like 100,000 or so, and in 18-19 we saw almost $500,000. So we're just keeping it flat because we don't know how things are going to look. So we're really just keeping it at budget. And then the miscellaneous revenues, recreational stuff that we're still showing, we're coming in a little bit higher, and then slightly higher than 18-19. So revenue is not looking so bad, but we would have been better than we are if COVID-19 had not hit.
Ava, when do we start seeing the tax, the property tax revenue in terms of the city getting it or starting to see the numbers come in?
The property tax, we get property tax. We get a portion of it in December, and we received I think this week we receive our remainder of the year, and then we'll have a little cleanup in June. So we're seeing that. So we're not having any problems. And the way we're set up on a teeter program with the county. So when there's defaults with homeowners, we still get our portion. They do the collection of those.
Okay.
So we shouldn't see, but with this, it may slow things down, not probably next year, but the following year.
Okay. So we see the April taxes when?
We will get that on the 16th of this month, so this week.
Okay. And the county will continue to pay us even if there are issues. I mean, people haven't paid or deferred or something.
That's how it's set up.
They
that they're
reported
still
that
they,
they received about 93% as of the 10th. They expect to have 95% within a week.
Okay.
Okay, so the expenditures for 2021, we're showing we're preliminary of 50.9 million of expenditures. When you compare it to the revisions, it's about 4 million, but like I said, the revisions that we project have a lot of vacancies in there, so we're still about 5% or more than the budget for this year. But if you look further down, let me use my cursor here. When you put it all together, the revenue, less expenditures, less your transfers out, we're looking at a $2 million decrease in general fund reserves. Doherty Valley, this is just a chart showing you a comparison of revenue expenditures over the years and the transfer. We no longer have reserves in Doherty Valley. So whatever Doherty Valley needs to make them whole, it would show as a transfer out of the general fund. Okay, so now the impact on the reserves. I just wanted to put this bullet here showing you that just based on our revisions to 1920, the use of reserves as a result of COVID-19 came to about 1.9 million. Our current proposed budget that we're going through shows an additional drawdown of 2 million use of general fund reserves, 1.6 million use of reserves out of the debt service fund to pay that debt service payment. So that's a total of 3.6 million use of reserves. So the projected fund balance or reserve balance is going to be 16.7 million at June 30th, 2021, or 36% of the reserve policy. And 40% of the reserve policy says we need to have 18.6 million. So instead of 40%, we're at 36%. This chart I just wanted to include since most of the reserves we're down to just having reserves in 2 places. Our policy says that we have reserves in Doherty Valley, the healthcare, the bond fund, and general fund. I thought it would just be easier to show that once we make this 2020 payment to the bond of 1.6 million, that whatever's left, just move that back to the general fund and it'll be a lot clean and clearer. So when we're asked, okay, how much do you have in reserves? You can just direct someone to the general fund and say it's the general fund instead of trying to add up all these different locations. Okay, so now we have options for council to consider. Option 1 would be the use of reserves, the 3.6 million to fill the gap. We have option 2, which are some service level reductions and revenue enhancements from departments. And option 3 would be a combination of use of reserves and maybe some service level reductions. So option 2, the service level reductions and revenue enhancements. The departments have prepared a list of their service level reductions to discuss with you today. The total of all reductions is 2.2 million. And also there's some 30,000 of revenue enhancements that the departments will talk about. So that's what we want to do now, is to turn it over to each department to have them kind of go over their service level reductions. So to start it off, I put me first since I was already talking. The Administrative Services Department has the employee holiday luncheon on here for $6,700, and also the tuition reimbursement program. The program this year is $30,000. We've already cut it down to $15,000 that's in the current proposal, but we're putting the remaining $15,000 on the list, and this would eliminate the program altogether for now. Any questions for admin services. Okay.
Who is
Mo-
that going to exactly impact the tuition reimbursement? Do we have several people in that program, or is it
We
more
had
of an
last
ongoing?
year about 4 or 5. We had a lot of people in there last year. I want to say about maybe 5 or 6 people in the program. I think we're down to maybe 1.
And is this for like a bachelor's, master's kind of program, or is it
Yes.
more?
Yes.
Yeah.
Or even some type of program like a certification, but mostly it's the bachelor's program. Okay, city clerk.
Thank you, Eva. For the city clerk's office, we would be record management consultant for $15,000. Government 101, we would still continue to offer the program. However, we would eliminate the tour of the city, so the cost of the bus for $1,000. Number 5 would be school tours giveaways. We would continue to still offer those 3rd grade tours for the students, but we would eliminate giving the giveaways to them after each session. So for a total of $17,500 from our office. Any questions for me?
What does the records management consultant do?
So we currently have that earmarked because our current records retention schedule was last updated in 2014. So it really does need a new update to include some new technology as well, email records, but also we were looking to include a nomenclature for our departmental electronic filing system.
Okay. We have community development.
Thank you, Eva. So for community development, we are looking at the elimination of our part-time code enforcement officer at about $50,000. As you can see in my notes, it would we have a longer response time to complaints and resolving those cases. Weekend code enforcement on the sign pickup would be eliminated, and the reduction in the proactive enforcement of commercial centers. We will still do the best we can, but with one code enforcement officer, some of these tasks will be delayed or eliminated. The second one on my list is plan check services. We currently have a budget of $200,000 in which we will route out larger plan checks, such as the future City Walk Hotel, to ensure we can get them up and going. We would reduce this to $100,000, which basically will cover 1 large plan check or maybe 2 medium plan checks for a savings of $150,000.
Any questions for Debbie?
Debbie, do you get reimbursed for that? I mean, a plan checks, you're going on any planes soon.
Yes, we do. And so what we can do, thank you for mentioning that, Councilmember Hudson, is that we will continue to monitor this. And if our revenues are still tracking well, we can come back at mid-year and ask for an adjustment if we need to.
Okay, other than that, or never mind, go ahead. That's good.
Okay.
Thank you.
Police services.
Good afternoon, and I think ours is pretty self-explanatory, as I'm sure everyone on the council is aware. We do 2 citizens academies every year, in addition to a youth academy in the summertime. We do have some additional costs associated with putting both of those academies on for, in particular, the shooting range fees for those academies. So if we were to eliminate the youth academy in the summer and both of our citizens academies during the year, you see the cost would be about $15,000, a little over that. So if there's any questions on that, I'd be happy to address them.
No donuts?
No, we're keeping those in the budget for the time being.
Okay, next up is Parks and Community Services.
Good afternoon, everyone. So we have a nice little list of reductions that we could propose. They all have some bearing on the community, as most of our programs do. So let me just kind of take you through them, and then I can answer any questions for you. So the first one that we have listed here is reducing our summer rec swim hours at both the Doherty Valley Aquatic Center and the San Ramon Olympic Pool. So that would be a fairly minor cut. Collectively at both would be 4 hours a week for 10 weeks. So that might be a reduction in the afternoon or a later early start. And that would net us, when you net out the expenditures and revenue, about $7,700. We would be looking at reducing our rec swim hours at the San Ramon Olympic Pool only during the spring. We normally open early in the spring and have rec swim, but it's often weather dependent. It's a little bit chilly, can be warm. So we think that's a fairly, still an impact, but not as bad as not having swimming in the summer. The next one is a little more difficult. That's reducing our free weekly Saturday events at Forest Home Farms. Right now, every Saturday at Forest Home Farms, we have a free family event where there's crafts and activities, and we staff that all with temp staff so that we've created continuity, and we're starting to get some quite large crowds out there doing that, but there is no revenue stream associated with those programs at this point. So in order to reduce them, we would have to reduce the temp staffing. So at that point, we would only be able to offer probably one Saturday a month with full-time staff. This is the type of thing that we could go partway and do a half. So we could go a couple of Saturdays a week, but if we reduce the temp staffing, then we wouldn't be able to offer all those Saturdays. How do I make, thank you. In regards to number 14, we currently have the presenting series that you all know and love at our Performing Arts Center. What we're recommending for next year, for a lot of reasons, would be to take the 2 performances that were canceled this spring and move them to next year, as well as 1 performance that we'd already committed to. So it would give us a small season, and that's again assuming that we make it through the COVID-19 crisis and are allowed to gather in this way again. That nets us a savings of about $75,000. And that number is a cumulative number again, because we'll reduce expenditures for marketing, staffing, all of the technical support, but we'll also reduce revenue because we'll sell less tickets. Then we move down to number 15, which is removing our free dive-in movie events at the San Ramon Olympic Pool and the Doherty Valley Aquatic Center. That's primarily savings in staffing, which is $4,500. Little teeny one, which is eliminating our free senior concert at the Al Costa Senior and Community Center. That would have been happening this summer, and that's a $400 reduction. There's no revenue associated to that one.
Kathy, before you leave that, how many people show up for this thing? Is it 400? We could charge $1 or something like that. I mean, sometimes these things are not worth the headache that it's about to come about when we've canceled the worst thing we could ever do is cancel this $400 savings.
The first time we tried it was this last summer, and we had, I think, less than 200 people attend, but they liked it. So it was a new program. It hasn't been well established yet, but it was a nice one. It's just a free one. So really we have to put all the free things up for you to consider.
Okay.
On this same tack, number 17, it would be eliminating this year's 4th of July concert. We have some commitments. You'll see below that the summer concerts as well. We have some commitments already to some of the bands and some of the groups. However, we can have a decent savings, and again, questionable whether or not we'll be able to offer this 4th of July concert this year. But if we do eliminate the 4th of July concerts, saving about $3,000. And then in regards to the summer concert series, what we'd like to consider is possibly reducing the July events, but keeping our August events in the hopes that we would be able to have them. And that would be a savings of $9,274. We think as a staff that there's a way to do our summer concerts this year, even if we have to move them out of the bowl and into a big flat grass field and set it up so that people can be in little cubes and we can keep people spaced. But we do think it'd still be possible if it's feasible. Excuse me. And finally, the last reduction I wanted to draw your attention to, it's already reflected in the budget, so there is not a dollar amount associated with this, but it does bear mentioning in this conversation as the Doherty Valley Library. The community college is moving forward with their construction, and they do plan to exit our agreement as of January 1. So at this point, what we're proposing and working with the county to do is we would maintain our level of service at the libraries through the end of December. And then at the departure of the community college, we would be doing some reductions in library services. Now, that being said, we're picking up a whole new community college library. So if you look at our library services and what we'll be able to do with 3 spaces, we'll actually increase the number of available hours to the community. But the goal would be to reduce at both sites and ensure that there's always a library open for people to go to. So whereas we might not always have Mondays open at both libraries, we would have Monday open at one of the libraries, and we would have the additional community college. So I did want to draw that to your attention because that will be a significant change the community will experience, but that won't happen until January. Any questions?
So,
Let me go back to the first, I'm sorry, go ahead, Sabina.
no, go ahead, go ahead.
The very first one that you put on your services, because we did this last time and then somebody started screaming and we got chicken. Anybody going to scream about us cutting back on these pool hours?
Well, I think there's not a reduction here that you wouldn't get a user group or a group of people that they loved it. So there's nothing that we have put on the table that people don't love, and you're going to get people who want to see none of them trimmed. But ultimately, some of them are harder decisions. We felt like a slight trim on aquatics might be more palatable. So if it's one afternoon at one pool and if it's a late start at another pool, that we could spread that out over the entire summer and make it more manageable in the hopes that we'd be able to bring it back next year.
Good point being is we're not going to have people show up at the council screaming, bring it back, bring it back.
I'm sorry that I wish I could promise you that, but I think that the community as a whole will hopefully understand that there were some hard decisions had to be made.
I would, so the, I'm having a somewhat difficult time imagining that somehow any even more than small group of people is going to be allowed to collect. I don't see it. I mean, you think about, I'm not talking about Levi's Stadium, but to think that we're going to have swimming in June, I just don't think is realistic. But I'm not the, this is, I'm putting my Greg Rogers hat on, I guess, on some level. But I think if it's possible, it might be useful to, because the places where most of the groups of people all revolve around Park and Rec, right? Or to a certain extent. Have the public health department comment on what we're talking about doing.
Yeah, swimming together.
Let's ask them, and do they think we're being realistic about X, Y, and Z? And they may say, well, call me in a month, but it'd be good to get some of that dialogue going. It's kind of out of left field, but all this stuff is. And if you think something like the NFL they're talking about not doing, that's for the very reasons that I'm citing. It isn't, some of this is budgetary, but a bunch of it may very well be just not allowed.
Yeah.
So we got to think about that too.
Our staff have reached out to some of the county and to other aquatics programs, and there's a great deal of conversation going on nationally, even on
Sure.
how to handle all of these. But no one has a decisive decision on that yet. So you're correct.
Sure. Okay.
Kathy, the question I had was on some of the programs, for example, at the farm and the concert, Can we ask the foundations for help on those and see if they can help augment or, give money towards any of that? Is that a possibility?
Yeah, absolutely. We certainly could go to them and see if they'd be willing to fund. That's a
Yeah.
great idea to look at as a revenue enhancement. So we can definitely look at that.
Yeah, the small, but the $400, the senior foundation, the library foundation, and then the arts foundation, and maybe the historic foundation. I know the historic foundation, they do have money, and the question is, what do they want to use it for? Some of it I know is reserved for capital projects, but I know they often fund operating and programs. So our foundations may be, like Sabina says, maybe a good way to augment some of these things to help keep some of them going for a year.
That's great feedback. And actually, we can definitely reach out to all 4 of them and see if they'd be willing to help out at this point.
You know what Phil was saying, now the one where it was 4 hours for 10 weeks, that I'm assuming is this summer. So that would be July, August, and September timeframe. Is that correct?
Well, actually, the budget goes July. So this is looking at July, August, and then June of next year.
In June of next year. Okay.
Yeah.
And then could you go to that page 31? Yeah, 30 and go to 30. Okay, yeah. And then the rec swim, that would be next year as well. Hopefully next year.
Next spring.
Next spring, we're in better shape and we know how bad it is or how good it is. So you could actually put that decision way off. But the summer hours, like Phil was saying, we may not have the option of opening our pools in July. We'll have to see.
It's very true. It's hard to say what we'll be able to do and what we won't be able to do this next summer. However, we also don't want to cancel everything and then find out that we can, in limited ways, gather people. I mean, there may be ways to reduce our total number of people coming into our facilities and still make them accessible, depending on what point. In August is our hot month, so that's some of the hope, I guess. You go to the heart of a recreation person and we want to figure out a way to bring people together when we can.
You go to page 31. The presenting series, I'm a season ticket holder there and I hate to see those go away, but I think you've got, the 2 performances that were missed and then 1 performance. I think that's probably one that we can manage and let people know what's happened, and hopefully in 21, 22 we can go back to our typical 5, 2 in the fall and 3 in the spring.
I think that Phil's point's I just wonder how many people are really going to return to go to these shows, but you got to do a budget. So I concur on it too, Scott. I think it's scary trying to figure out what the thinking is of people over the next 6 to 10 months.
Mm-hmm.
Any other questions for Parks and Recreation?
My general thoughts are the first time through is just to kind of reflect and think about this and let it sit for a while in my mind before I comment.
Okay.
So first blush, it's hard to react without some emotions on some of this stuff. So I'd rather just reflect for a while and circle back to us as a group after we've gone through this once and had a chance to think about it more.
Okay.
Thank you.
Next up is Public Works.
Good afternoon, Mayor and council members. So Public Works, we worked really hard to get our budget reduced and minimized our increase from the previous year. So what you'll be seeing are our service level reduction proposals. And with that, each one of these will definitely be a visible impact to the public and to the city. So the first one is reducing the maintenance service levels and frequencies. We looked at the various services that we provide and looked at the amount of frequencies that we do for a number of them. And so that includes janitorial facilities and park restrooms, landscape maintenance, parks maintenance, carpet cleaning, and roadway. So if we were to dial back in these areas, we did calculate a savings of about 921,000. However, that will create deferred maintenance costs, visual impacts to the public. We already get calls from the public on concerns on various things like weeds and whatnot. So that would definitely increase. Putting funding towards all these items does keep with the lifespan of the amenities. So it would reduce the lifespan of these amenities. And then we would also need staff to just keep up with all the reduced services and make sure that they stay and keep attention to all these items. Yes.
Yeah, I assume that there's numbers between 921 and 0 that you can reduce. So like if we said, well, could you make that number 300,000 or 400,000? You could do something in between?
Yes, absolutely. That is a total of all of them. I didn't break it down because I just wanted to present that that's where we could go with looking at some reductions. But what my intention was, if we were to look at this some more, that we would look at each one of these in more detail and prioritize them and provide more impacts for each one of them. So I definitely have a breakdown for each one of them, and it could be a number definitely between 0 and 900.
Yeah, I think to understand this better, I'd love to see what frequency means. And, like 2 days a week brings us to 300, 3 days a week or something like that. So I think that would be helpful to understand when we talk about. Yeah.
All right. So the next item, eliminate temporary and limited term staffing. We have a total of 425,000 of temporary staff, as well as a couple of limited term staff. The temporary staff are both for maintenance as well as inspection. Maintenance, we have 4 part-time staff, and they are the ones that cover our high season when we're very busy during the summer and early fall. And that has been quite helpful. We actually had contractors doing some of that work, and we found that temporary staff was actually cheaper than using contractors. So that's why we went the route of temporary staff. The limited term staffing is for both the GIS program as well as landscape renovation program and work. And so if we were to eliminate those, it would definitely be a big impact on the GIS program and inspection on the construction of any landscape work that was going on. With regards to the inspection services, that's for development and CIP. We had put some monies in there for our COP projects that were funding that were just recently approved, as well as development. So some of that is recuperated, but that would also depend on the fees that come in and the timing of it as well. For the next item, this one is a maintenance cost for the department in the amount of 534,000, and that's just the contract costs. So I put it on the list just for discussion purposes. The maintenance of the school parks is done by the city, and it is done per the agreement with the school district. If it were to be returned to the school district, then the quality of work would be impacted. The cost would be definitely reduced for the city, but we definitely get a lot of calls about the school parks and pay great attention to them. The next item is reducing the hours of operation for the Bollinger Fountain. That is definitely a popular feature for weddings and proms and pictures and what have you, and just for the traveling public. So we just as you remember, we had replaced the pump, and so it's been working fantastically and continues to, knock on wood. So if we were to reduce the hours, we could have a savings about $15,000, and then just run the fountain minimally. We can't turn it off because that would destroy the pump, but it would be a visual impact to residents. Number 24 is a reduction in engineering professional services. That's similar to the inspection services, where we have engineering consultants on board to help us with our workload with the engineers. If we were to take that away, then we can do some of that work in-house. We would still need some of the services to deal with any specialty engineering services like land surveying type of work. The next couple of items are the revenue enhancements. So the two were thought of by Public Works. The first one is increasing the user fees for maintenance. The user fees, we do collect them, and they do go towards maintenance services. It is minimal from the standpoint of we plan to receive about $450,000 this year, where our cost for maintaining the parks is almost $8 million. So as you can see, that is a minimal, I don't want to say minimal amount, but it is an amount that we could look at to help provide more funding towards the cost of our fields and our park maintenance. And so I don't have a cost there because that would definitely be a very robust discussion with the user groups, and just to decide what we should move forward with, and working with parks and community services on moving forward with that concept if it's deemed appropriate. And then the last item, we do have some fees that we could look at as far as increasing, and the one that is listed is the encroachment permit fees. Our hourly rate for inspections could be increased and bring it more in line with some of the other cities surrounding us, and we calculated that amount to be about $30,000. Any questions?
Dave, you raised?
Yeah, let me start off with 25. Seems like every board I'm on, we never get enough for the user fees to pay for the maintenance. And right now, I know we're going through it, the Air District is the first time I've ever seen them go through no proposal to increase. I'd be very leery of that one. On the agenda tonight, 5.3, Maria, we're looking at 6 million or something like that for trees, and $1 million of it is for future things or like a contingency thing. Is there any way to put that off, or I would call cutesy up the language, that we don't spend that until we've at least seen where we are over the next 8-10 months? I have a real concern, but I'm going to hold off on this question about page 18 and 19 until we get to the end. But I'm thinking there's $1 million there, or is that just something that has to go into the contract as a contingency cost?
You're talking about the contract for our tree services?
Yeah.
Yeah, that is, well, it's over I think it's a 5-year period.
Yeah.
And the cost.
But there's $1 million.
Right. Yes.
And is there any way, like, okay, don't do this until, I don't know, we're sure that we're not broke?
Absolutely. I mean, there's no, we can always wait and spend. It's the contract in itself, but as far as spending on that contract, we can wait and make sure that the financial situation is appropriate to be spending money there.
Thank you.
Yeah, I think I was going to bring that up tonight as well. So I'm glad, Dave, you talked about it.
Any other questions? Okay, so now we're at the end of the presentation.
Sorry, I did have one more, just
Okay,
one more
go
comment.
right ahead.
I'd like to know what the proposal by department is as a percentage of their budget. Because I see engineering stepping up with big dollars. I know that that's also a big department, but I'd like to know what it is by these departments' proposals, just as a follow-up, Eva. Obviously don't need it now, but
Okay.
thank you.
Okay.
I had one for you, Eva, actually, and I was saving it because I missed the meeting or I didn't get here in time.
Mhm.
We kicked in at mid-year so much for PERS. What have we already given them that check?
No, you're talking about the 1.5 million to the trust.
Yeah, or 500,000, I think was something else we added on, or
Oh, it was 1.5 million to the trust, Dave.
Right. It was 1 million, then the finance committee recommended a 500,000 more. So when we brought it to council, it was 1.5. No, and what we had suggested, or I think the finance committee suggested, is staggering it, only sending so much, like maybe 500,000 every month. But when everything fell, the economy went kind of sideways. So we decided just to hold on and see, because we know we were going to lose money. I just didn't want to send it
yeah.
if we were losing money. So have it
Particular interest to
appropriated.
me was your report that you haven't heard from CalPERS yet. And until you've heard from what I call the three amigos now,
Yeah.
all right, they're getting lumped together, trying to if one of these groups has just lost their shirt and they're going to start kicking up the price to us, then it'd be better to have the cash in reserve, I think. I'll leave it up to the other four.
I think I would not be surprised if there is some wavering on CalPERS' part as far as what they're going to ask for in the immediate term. I wouldn't be surprised. I mean, they
Wavering.
yeah, wavering meaning we're not sure what to do.
Yeah.
And that's a good point, Dave. It's also just for when the thing takes a dip is when you buy. That's not when you keep your money in cash, just as a general rule. But all right, well, I appreciate I appreciate the work that's gone into this. I know this is difficult stuff, and like Kathy said, recreation people like to get folks together, and it's a pretty hard thing to do for anyone. So thank you.
Well, so we're going to incorporate the feedback that we received today. And it sounds like we're probably going to need another budget session. But if you guys want to talk about anything pertaining to what we presented, and I'm going to turn it over to the city manager to have any.
Well, I do. Thank you, Bill. If you can go back to page 18. And one of the problems is, even when we've been here so darn long, we remember. And 18, let's try 19. Is that the one? If you look all the way on the right, the 2021 prelims, property tax, franchise fees, and pretty much miscellaneous revenue, everything else is negative. And I remember when the property took a dip and we didn't get that increase, that's a big chunk out of that. I mean, we're already down 1.75. We're down 1.75, assuming that those things go up. And I'm leery of going much further on reserves, which is virtually meaningless, because I said I wouldn't go under 30. I wouldn't go under 20. And now you're telling me we could be at 16 and a half. So I really hold firm on my positions, but I'm just really leery of that. I remember where we thought we had it under control. I want to say if it's 2001 or 2 or 3, somewhere in there. And all of a sudden there were 3 years under the gang of 3 that just were terrible. And we lost a lot off of reserves. Am I just being paranoid, or is that potential in here?
Well, if you want to look at it, there's a lot of big unknowns because we've never dealt with a pandemic in this situation. So there is a bunch of unknowns. The consultants that we have are very good consultants, and that's why you got the projections that we have. Our reserve policy was conservative. If you remember when we did the reserve policy, it actually talked about, I want to say where this budget is landing right now, around 36% of reserves, but the council wanted 40%. So I remember, I'm not sure whether it was, if Eva remembers, but it was in the 30s that actually when we did the study, where it landed, and the council bumped it to 40, and that's where we've been. And we actually are doing another review of that reserve as we speak. And so there's some other recommendations that we'll be bringing forth as well. So this budget is a result of not reducing services. So what you see, right, is a reduction. If we went as is today with no major modifications, our reserves will dip to 36%. One observation is that this is exactly why we have reserves, because this is what we've planned for. And we've even stated, right, in our original calculation is what happens if we have this major impact. And well, we just had this major impact. So there's that to consider. If the council wants us to drop this budget further, we trimmed everything we could out of it without impacting services. If council wants us to go further, then those, what we call kind of the tier 2, and that's what each of the department heads presented you, that is where we will go to further trim this budget down. So it's really the appetite of the council for the use of reserves in this, because we will certainly go below the 40% reserve policy that we currently have. I say that with the caveat that not too far down the road here, within a few weeks, that we'll be reviewing that reserve policy, and the council may not even feel that that reserve policy of 40% is actually the number that you want. One of the difficult parts is, as you know, we go back to the 18-19 actuals to base our reserve policy. So we're a year behind, which has an impact on how we calculate the reserve. So there's a couple dynamics in there that you have to consider. However, if you choose to or give us instruction to further reduce this budget, then that's where these service impacts will come in.
Let me make
Sabina. Sabina had her hand up.
Oh, I'm sorry.
Okay. So I think the way I want to look at the reserves, instead of percentage, I would like to see, what would take, how much reserve do we need to, if there is a major impact, to keep the city running for a year, for 2 years, something like that, where we took a downturn. So if those kind of projections, instead of 40%, 30%, I mean, I know in my personal budget, what if I just pull back on everything for me to survive a year without a job, this is how much I need in the bank. And for me to, fully kind of have everything I want, this is how much I need for a year or 2 years. So I would like us to think in that way. The other thing, Joe, I wanted to ask you was, with the CARES Act, are we taking into consideration anything that we might be able to get from support from the federal or the state, during this pandemic, and any of that money can come down and help us out with some of our services here? So
No, we have not taken that into consideration. That's a very good point. However, I will also point out that the CARES Act at this point in time only addresses cities of $500,000 or more. 500,000 people or more. There is some other there's some other legislation currently in the pipeline that could address the smaller cities, but we don't know where and how that will end up. So no, we haven't calculated that in. We don't really want to until we know that there is actually some money. There's also some money we should hopefully receive from our insurance carrier because we have a policy on interrupted revenue and business. So there could be some there too, but it's a pandemic. So, they may not see it the same way we do because of the fact that it's a pandemic and it's not just this single incident to a single jurisdiction, because there's lots of jurisdictions that have this. So there could be some revenue there. We're not sure how that's going to end up in the long run. As far as the
Dave?
reserve,
I'm sorry.
sorry, Mayor, as far as the reserve policy goes, the original reserves, the report that we did and the calculation and analysis we did through the government finance officers organization best practices did exactly what you asked and contemplated a dollar amount to get us through. And we actually, on a conservative basis, for a 3-year period of time, took the worst case scenario where we took our 2008 that issue. And when that crash happened, we analyzed that crash and took our worst year and multiplied it by 3, when in actuality, it slowly, it wasn't 3 years of negative impact. It was the negative impact, the crash, and then kind of slowly climbing out of the well, if you would think. But we, on the conservative side, just took the 3 years straight and calculated that across the board. So there was a dollar number. I believe it was in the $16+ million range. I don't remember, which is 30-something% of the expenditures, and that's how the council landed at, okay, that makes sense. However, we want to be even more conservative and put it at 40%. That's how that occurred. That's all information we can get you as well on those reports.
Okay. Appreciate
Dave and then Scott.
Yeah, I want to be clear, Joe. I think what staff has done is about as good as we're going to do it. 2 comments that I made, I'd like to see, if we can hold back on that $1 million contingency on the tree thing contract, which I heard, yeah, we could. It was contingency anyway, if they found something. And $500,000 not being sent to PERS till we find out what they're going to do. The interesting thing is what Joe was just talking about, the $500,000. That was half the conversation we had with National League of Cities representative for League of California Cities. And in the middle of it, it seems like the MPO is going to be making the decision, the Metropolitan Transportation, for the largest portion of the local funding. So I think you will know something about it in short, keep the light on, in short order, but I don't think that's just a plus to the budget. It's just some more that we can get in on revenues. We need to focus primarily on the expenditures and where we're going to cut back. And I think staff's done it. I mean, I'm usually the one complaining the most. I think what they've got is as good as we can do it.
So, Mayor, through the mayor, if Maria, I'm sorry, I don't have that contract in front of me, but what appropriation is for that contract tonight? It's not the full 6 million, it's just a contract with an annual appropriation, or is it just the contract?
It's just the contract. So there are no appropriations at this time. It's only the contract. The appropriations happen with our operating budget every fiscal year.
So that makes it a little bit more difficult when you think of the contingency reserves. That's 5 years of a calculation in which that contingency, which you're speaking of, has not been appropriated. It's just considered within the contract.
Well, it's if they find something new. That's what caught my attention. If I read that right. Well,
Yeah.
I'll pull it tonight. We'll discuss it. It's just trying to find anything additional that besides what you had that maybe could also be kicked on there. But I mean, I'm not complaining about it other than that. I think you've done it. I'm worried about things because I've seen that property tax in particular. But that's, this is our answer to do it, in my opinion, and I'll support it.
Scott,
I, I like the option 3, which is a combination of use of some reserve and implementing some of the service level reductions and revenue enhancements. As Joe pointed out earlier, the calculation associated with having reserves was based on a multiple bad years. And so we would have enough money to carry us through. None of us alive today working in the city have had anything that approaches what we're experiencing now. This is the most profound event in our lifetimes. You have to go back to World War II to come across something of a similar consequence. So using some reserves going forward doesn't, I think that's why we have some reserves. Our ability to build those reserves has been shown through the last, well, 15 years I've been on the council. We end up the year showing a surplus of revenues over expenditures. And so we've been able to build reserves, and we've gone through and we've used reserves for all kinds of things. You know, what Phil said about the $1.5 million to the pension trust, that Dave, that's not a payment to PERS, that's a payment to our pension trust, and it's $1.5 million. And Phil makes a really good point. When stocks are on sale is when you buy, not when you sell. But we might want to revisit that by a different number, but I hope we can use a combination of reserves and service level reductions. I don't want to implement all of the service level reductions that we were shown. And I'd obviously like to get a copy of this presentation so I can kind of do my own markup and for a second level of discussion. That's all.
yeah, it's also my thought that if this discussion a month ago would have taken one path, we have this conversation today. It's my opinion that our conversation 30 days from now, in the middle of April, I mean, in the middle of May, is going to be, I think, different than our perspective today. We should maintain a lot of flexibility in how we're going to be approaching this. And I think staff's done a wonderful idea to begin to line things up. And I have also, I think, from my point of view, what happens eventually in June might look different than what we see even in May. And I think we have to maintain a lot of flexibility, not get caught up in necessarily details right now, keeping the big picture in mind. If I tend to go in one direction, is that the reserves were built just for this occurrence. We don't want to lose more than about a third of those in 1 year. I'd be very concerned about digging more than a third of our way through those. But I think we have to look at big picture items. And I think as unfortunate as it might be, reducing our costs are going to be really important, subject to what we learn in 30 days and what we know in 60 when we have to finalize our budget. Because I think it could look different than today. We don't know. But thank you, staff. Good job. Good start. Joe, any comments, or Eva, any comments before we draw this to a close?
The only thing I wanted to just make sure I'm understanding, you want to have maybe another budget workshop to have more discussion, because the next workshop normally, under normal circumstances, would have been the whole budget prepared. So it seems like we need to incorporate another workshop to kind of to have more discussion.
I'm looking to my other council members. I have the impression that in 30 days from now, we're going to have, in my opinion, some fundamentally different information to work from. Do you guys think we need to have that? And do we have the time horizon, Eva, to give you additional feedback in 30 days? It's not going to throw you off track for the final budget in June.
Yeah, and we have to make sure we adopt a budget by June 30th. That's the goal.
Yes.
Because if we don't, then we'll be in trouble. We won't have an expenditure plan to spend any money come July 1.
Well, June 9th is the date you set for us to establish a budget.
Right, and you still have the second meeting in June also as a backup. Um,
I'm not going anywhere.
We do have the ability to have a second workshop, so that is no problem whatsoever, and we can do that in the first week or so of May.
Okay.
So
We'll have a
something
better-
after May 4th, when we may have a little bit better, may or may not, May the 4th.
Yeah.
After that.
Well, I would assume that at least probably a week prior where we'll know what May 4th will bring. I don't think they'll, of course, it's my speculation, but I don't think they'll spring it on us and, May 2nd and tell us what we're doing May 4th. But what I'm hearing is we kind of stay the course where we're at here with the understanding that we're really going to look at the reductions, the phase 2 reductions that the department heads have developed as some of those, incorporating some of those into the budget, and also take whatever new information we receive during the next few weeks to help inform at least the first couple months of the fiscal year moving forward.
Good.
And I think we all seem to be leaning towards option 3. Please correct me if I'm wrong, but a combination of reserves and
Yeah,
some
probably.
service level. Yeah.
I
Okay.
think that just so the world that I bounce against a lot has this notion of bending trends and all that, right? But it's still a trend, right? What we're doing is we're delaying a set of bad news scenarios in the healthcare world, right?
Yes. Yes.
So it doesn't overwhelm at a given point in time. We have to think about that then in terms of the tail of that. To me, just extends into July and August.
Yep.
As it relates to recreational activities. I just don't see it not. And that's where that's the tough part of this, but they're already saying, forget a 4th of July parade, right? I think that's been a given. So I guess we'll be spared the bring back the fireworks statements. So there is a silver lining.
No.
But, nonetheless, I just there's a highlight. I just saw a headline that said colleges are considering what should they do for their entire fall semester.
Yeah.
Yes, that's exactly right.
And I don't think we're going to be sheltering in place forever, but anything much as it relates to a bunch of folks getting together just is it's wishful thinking. And that's that. And so that's just a serious consideration. And when I think about that, I think about swimming, right?
Yeah.
I mean, that's an obvious one. So that's gloom. That's Greg Rogers is now done talking. And
I don't know if you saw pictures of San Francisco over the Easter weekend. It didn't look anything like San Ramon.
Yeah.
People were in parks, people were everywhere. They were social distancing, but people were out.
They're doing it here.
The challenge with Kathy, to Councilmember Alone's points, which are very, very good points, and the fact that it's going to be something, we just don't know exactly what this looks like.
Exactly right.
So her challenge is same thing. It's not all or nothing. So would you be uncomfortable if we had a rec swim that had every other lane? would you be uncomfortable with a rec program that used to have 50 kids, that had 25 kids that were spread out over a football field, size of a football field, or, and if some of the discussion, right, is allowing restaurants to start back up again, but it would be with half the occupancy allowed. And so that's what Kathy struggles with, is it's easy to just shut that completely down, because then we know that number and we know how to do it. But what does a responsible, socially distanced program look like? And same with the concert series. Would the concert series be reasonable if you only had 25% of the capacity that you could give? Does it make sense? Or so those are the things that she grapples with.
Yep.
Specifically in terms of these this summer, coming up this summer.
And I can guarantee you that people are so sick of their kids right now, the little ones, that if this opens up during the summer, our summer programs might get more popular with, if everything opens up as it is, because that's what I see parents with young kids struggling with right now.
But the circumstance here is such that it's not possible to limit the number of people coming into a park for a concert. That's really not.
Yep.
And so to the extent that your suggestions surrounding limited class size and all that, again, I think that's got to get run through the public health lens, something we've never had to do before. I like your idea of, lanes. Is that good? Taking people's temperatures, there's some things like that might be part of letting somebody in. It's not completely eliminating things, but there's some weird stuff. What will appear weird to us would have 2 months ago that may not be. So I'd like to know what shutting it down looks like to a certain extent, not because I want to go there, but because I want to know what our parameters are. And so if there's even just a back of the envelope, Joe and Kathy and Eva, that would be helpful.
Yeah, we can do that.
Okay.
Thank you.
Any other closing comments before we break for dinner, and then we'll come back here by 7 o'clock?
Dinner? Is there dinner
Thanks, everybody.
downstairs?
Oh, I'm sorry, Dave. Did we tell you about that?
Yeah, bull.
Yeah.
Phil, your point is so well taken. Wait till they tell us that this stuff is transmitted through water too.
Yeah. All right.
Thanks, everybody.
Thank you.
Good work.